Greetings. My name is Irfan Nuruddin. I am the director of the South Asia Center at the Atlantic Council. And on behalf of the team at the South Asia Center, it is a great honor to welcome all of you to this very special event on women's gains in Afghanistan. This event is the third in a series of 3 public events that we have organized in conjunction with the US Afghan Women's Council and the American Council on Women, Peace and Security. Their partnership in bringing these events to you has been a great pleasure for us, and without their help and participation, none of it would have been possible. In particular, I want to highlight the contributions of Ms. Sarah Greengrass, the Executive Director of the US Afghan Women's Council, from whom you will hear later in the program, Dr. Susan Yoshihara, the founder and president of the American Council on Women, Peace and Security, and also in particular, Ms. Charlie Ponticelli from the American Council as well, for her untiring efforts to promote these events to maximize the audience that gets to benefit from the incredible speakers that we have brought. Our previous 2 events live on our website at the Atlantic Council. Do check them out if you happen to have missed them earlier. Without further ado, let me introduce to you the wonderful panelists that you will be hearing from today. Fatima Gilani is the member of the Afghan negotiating team, calling in this evening from Doha, where she is there with the team. She also serves as a member of the Constitutional Lawyer Jirga, as a commissioner for the Constitutional Review Committee, and as president of the Afghan Red Crescent Society. Lieutenant Colonel Natalie Trogus serves with the US Marine Corps and has served as a former advisor to the Afghan Ministry of Defense and as a former US military gender advisor. We also hope to be joined by Minister Hasina Safi, Acting Minister for Women's Affairs for the government of Afghanistan. She is not with us yet, but we're hoping that she will be able to join us while the program's ongoing. And finally, you will be in the great hands of one of the Atlantic Council's foremost leaders and friends, Ambassador Paula Dobriansky, who serves as Vice Chair of the Scowcroft Center for Strategy and Security. Ambassador Dobriansky, thank you so much for all you do for us. The floor is yours.
So much, Irfan, really, and also thanks to the Atlantic Council. You've been a tremendous co-partner. And as you know, I am affiliated with the Atlantic Council, but as well as the US Afghan Women's Council and our other sponsors. And I'm really delighted that you took the time up front to thank each and every one of them. And I know that Sarah Greengrass of the US Afghan Women's Council will do the same at the end of the program. It's just been a terrific partnership. Thank you. And I also want to say I'm very excited about moderating this discussion and with our very distinguished panelists. But I'd like to, by the way, put our discussion in context because, you know, peace in Afghanistan will only be durable if it includes the full and meaningful participation of the Afghan people, and in particular that of Afghan women. And research has really shown the participation of women in peace, negotiations, and processes is absolutely critical to the success of any peace-building process, in line with, by the way, the United States Women, Peace, and Security Act, as well as the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. And it's essential that women have a leadership role in these negotiations. I wanted to put that up front because that's the focus of our discussion today. And I'm just really, really delighted that we do have 3 very distinguished panelists who have, in fact, been introduced. Although, Minister, if you don't mind, because you are with us now, as I see, and I hope you can hear me, I would like to at least just say a few words just about you. We're going to go to you first in terms of our my questions. I'd like to say, you know, you are really recognized as a professional leader, a well-known civil society and women's rights activist, and you are an expert with more than, well, some 20 years experience in development, focused on organizational development, of policies, programs, women's economic empowerment. And, you know, in that regard, it seems like you may have popped out, I'm not sure, but I wanted to at least make sure that we had that information about you. So let me actually go forward here. I'm still not clear. I can't see the minister, if the minister is still with us, because I do see here, we lost the minister. All right. My apologies to everyone. You know, that's the trial and tribulations of technology. You have to really learn it. All right. So let me greet Fatima Galani here. It's so wonderful seeing you. I have not seen you for a while, and it's just fantastic seeing you. Let's get you off on the first question I want to put forward. You are one of only 4 women on the Afghan negotiation team. So what have been the central challenges? We'd like to hear about that. How are you involving women at the community level to effectively represent their voices and their priorities at the table? Welcome to you. Fantastic to see you, and over to you.
Hello, Paula. It is wonderful to see you after such a long time. But believe me, very often I think of you. And of course, I'm grateful for what you have been doing for Afghanistan for such a long time. It is not easy to have only 4 women. We wish that we could have more. But we have women of experience. And also, we have men who are supporting us, men in our delegation who are great support for women's cause. But it is not the same if we don't have the voice of young women and active women and women from all sides of Afghanistan. Thanks to technology, it has become quite easy. If it wasn't because of the technology, and it was a few years ago, even if we had a chance to go to all these women, it wouldn't have been possible. Here in Doha, we have a fantastic team, support team, that they organize meetings, virtual meetings all over Afghanistan with civil society, with young people, with women's activists, and in areas that you wouldn't have even thought that they would have the facility to come and talk to us. We speak to them. We take their words very seriously. We make notes, and then we go and share it with the rest of the team, and then we act upon it. Quite frankly, the message is very clear, and it is almost the same message that we get from all over Afghanistan. Yes, they want peace, but they don't want any peace. They want an inclusive peace. They want a peace that women can have a role in it. They want a future. They want this peace to bring a future that they could have a life in it. They could have a political life. They could study. They could have a role in every aspect of Afghanistan. So the message was very, very clear. There was one specific message that almost in every of my programs, I repeat that because it really shook me. It was a young woman from northern Afghanistan. I think the program was arranged by Ms. Kofi. And this young girl told me that, listen to me carefully. I want you to know what I'm saying. Yes, we want peace. But if the peace brings a situation that I'm backlocked at home and I can't go to study, I will not be able to work, I will take the risk of life and death today, and I prefer to be in the situation today. This is a very strong message. So we have to be very careful to include everyone, not just women, but all realities of Afghanistan, the minorities, the religious minorities, and others. So without that, first of all, I don't think we could have peace. Even if we have, I don't think we could sustain it.
Thank you for that. I think you raise a very important point about inclusivity, and that for peace to be achieved, it's not just one sector of society, it has to be all. Let me ask you, if I may, that there has been a lot of concern about the deterioration in the security situation and then the ongoing peace talks. And there have been Afghan women who we've heard their voices that have raised concern that the conversation in Afghanistan has basically sort of pinned their rights as negotiable in the effort to achieve peace and security. In other words, that they might be forsaken for seemingly, as I say, a broader chance. How can the tremendous gains be preserved and expanded? Would you respond to that, Fatima, please?
Yes, yes, Paula. I mean, look, I am from the generation of peace. When I was born and brought up, Afghanistan was at peace, and I had taken it for granted. We all had taken it for granted. I used to think that if I am qualified, I could be whoever I want and achieve whatever I want. But look at it. It didn't happen. Although women's changes started exactly 100 years ago, but things did change with war. We had such a horrible setbacks that it took us years to regain it. This time, we don't take anything for granted. This time, the number of fantastic, educated young women that we have, they will not allow such a thing to happen. Our status is not negotiable. In this constitution, we have nothing which is against Islam. We are in an Islamic country and our rights are within the Islamic framework, and we are going to fight for it. And not just women, there will be men who would be fighting for us. So we also need help from our friends. Any help, because we know that Afghanistan cannot live without help. We need to have financial help, development help, and lots of things for the future. Human rights, women's rights, and all the gains that we have achieved for the last 19 or 20 years, it has to be kept, or at least most of it should be kept. In my opinion, that what we have for women in the Afghan constitution, it could be defended from every point of view.
Thank you. Lieutenant Colonel, I'm going to go to the minister. Minister, we see you and we'd really like to hear from you. We are glad that you have been able to rejoin us, Trials and Tribulations of Technology. And forgive me, I'm going to go right to you. If you would share with us, which is everyone wants to hear, how has your ministry, been engaged in ensuring that the voices of Afghan women are heard and that the priorities are implemented? You play a very important role. And so please share with us your perspectives, because you being such a civil society leader, you have an important perspective, important view to render here. Welcome to you, and we'd like to hear from you. Minister, I do see that your microphone is off, but we're not hearing you. I'm just pausing for a moment. Sometimes, these things.
Greeting.
Please. Minister, do you want to try again?
Is it working now? Because I'm unmuted.
Yes, you are unmuted. We heard you, but sadly, it did not come through clearly. Minister, if you don't mind turning your camera off, that would be helpful, because we think that maybe turn the camera off and leave the mic on. And hopefully then let us know you're on and we'll try to get you in. I know everyone wants to hear your views. Okay, I'm going to go to you, Lieutenant Colonel, because I understand she had to, she dropped off. So let's go to you. I want to keep the discussion going. And Fatima, also thank you. Thank you. We're appreciative of both of you that you're coming in clearly here. So Lieutenant Colonel Trogus, oh, okay. Let me take one more minute. Minister, please turn your camera off and let's see if your voice comes through.
Can you hear me now?
Perfectly, perfectly. All right, perfectly. Yes,
Oh,
if
great.
you would not mind. And thank you, Fatima, Lieutenant Colonel, and our viewership. Let me just ask the question again. I mentioned to you, Minister Safi, my question basically was, what role has your ministry played and what have you done? You've been very much a civil society leader to ensure that the voices of Afghan women are heard and their priorities are implemented. How have your perspectives changed since the time that you were, in fact, a civil society leader? We'd love to hear from you and hear your thoughts. Minister, please go ahead. All right. Well, I'm not hearing her. So it doesn't seem like it's working well.
Have been
Sadly, I have to say, Minister, it's not working. You're not coming in. So our technology team on this end. Sadly, it's not coming in. Minister, I have to suggest that I think you have to go off. I need to, because we're not hearing you. I do want to get Lieutenant Colonel, you've been very patient, so thank you, with the technology issue. Now, you were stationed, while you were stationed in Afghanistan, you in fact served as the gender advisor to the Afghan Ministry of Defense Gender and Human Rights Directorate. And it's really fascinating, the role that you played. Can you, as I understand it, you also work day to day to implement different types of gender-related frameworks, if I could say, and policy priorities. Can you give us some insight as to your work, how that had some successes, what were the challenges, what were the biggest wins for you, and what recommendations do you have for how we can make this work better? Please, Lieutenant Colonel, go forward.
Ambassador, I would like to thank you and the American Council on Women, Peace, and Security for inviting me today. I really appreciate this opportunity to share my gender advising experiences. One of the first key aspects was to become familiar with the Afghan National Action Plan 1325, which is written by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and is executed in coordination with the Ministry of Women Affairs. And so our authorities allowed us to reach out and meet with these ministers, as well as coordinate with the international community and the various embassies who are providing a tremendous amount of support to Afghan women, particularly. Some of the biggest challenges that I experienced was the unfamiliarity of women, peace, security in Afghanistan, and specifically from the Department of Defense. And so just wanted to also mention is that these thoughts are on my own and do not represent the views of the Marine Corps or the Department of Defense. But as a gender advisor, it was critical for advising the command to notify them of the gender perspectives and different requirements that we were trying to assist the Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Interior in supporting the security and stability through the Afghan perspective. Some of the quick wins that we received was the constant determination and persistence within the women and the two women ministers at the time, DM Hosanna Jalil, who worked at the Ministry of Interior, as well as Ahmad Munera Yosusada, who works at the Ministry of Defense, and their support with my counterpart in particular at the Human Rights and Gender Integration Directorate provided some key oversight in implementing women, peace, and security initiatives. During this time, one of the big key wins we were able to achieve was after an analysis of the status of women in the Ministry of Defense, particularly. By the time I redeployed in June, we were able to influence the 1399 Tashkil, which is the Afghan staffing document for the Army. And we were able to appoint 32 gender advisors to that staffing document. And that provided a network of gender advisors and gender focal point networks across the Afghan security forces to have a group of women and men to be able to integrate women. And so that was a key win for us. Additionally, we were able to secure funding to be able to hire and pay civilian women who would staff the daycares all throughout Afghanistan, so that Afghan women soldiers would be able to have reliable childcare so that they in turn can go to work. And so these were some quick wins, but it did not come without its trials and tribulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting in terms of what you had shared. If I could ask you, because you said, well, these did not come without trials or tribulations. So what were the biggest trials and tribulations that you encountered? Please, can you say a little bit more about that? That would be appreciated, and particularly in the context of today's discussion.
Yes, so one of the significant challenges experienced in trying to implement the Afghan National Action Plan was the senior leadership and their championing of the women, peace, security, and agenda. And so one of the biggest challenges that I faced was in discussing with one of my peers to seek sex and age disaggregated data, which allows us to have a better picture of the environment. I was told that he was not going to implement SAD in the daily staffing products unless the 3-star told him to do so. And this became problematic because without understanding the numbers of and the ranks of Afghan women soldiers, it became challenging in trying to implement policies and also apply funding as articulated in the National Defense Authorization Act, as well as the Afghan Security Forces Fund, and to seek donor funding for programs that were necessary to build women's capacity. And so as of July 2019, a lot of the focus on gender advising in Afghanistan from the Afghan National Defense Security Forces transitioned from building facilities to empowering women in skills that they could not be taken away. So by having these numbers of how many women, for instance, had high school diplomas, had bachelor's degrees, and potentially needed master's degree, we were able to write programs and seek funding from the international community to establish bachelor's degree programs at local universities and throughout 4 provinces in Afghanistan, as well as build master degree programs for women to continue on. And we were able to leverage existing basic Dari and Pashto level language training, and also seek approval to increase that level of training from the 9th grade level all the way up to the 12th grade level. And so these, the sex and age disaggregated data is critical because we need to know where the women are and what programs they need in order to empower themselves. And to go to what Ms. Galiani stated was that women's voices, want to be heard and they can be heard, but they just need the forum to do so.
Very good points. Fatima, if I may, and forgive me if I may call you Fatima, I feel I've known you for, well, thank you. I would welcome any comments that you may like to make on what the Lieutenant Colonel had said. But I want to ask you an additional question. So any comments on what she said, but what are the specific actions that you think that the international community should be taking at this time to better support you and the women at the table? Are there certain actions that you think are important at this time? And again, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to say that a lot has changed for women in the army and in the police, but we are far from even come close to a comfortable situation. It is not just women who has to be trained and understand, but also men should be trained that how to be a good colleague and a support for women in the army and the police. So we have a lots of work to do there, and we have to show that working in the army and working in the police is an honor, not because they couldn't find another job and they came here. So I am the Colonel, I agree that further education and higher education is really very, very important. We are walking on a very, very difficult path today. We cannot get it wrong. We have to be very careful to get it right. So we need to have a national support, but we should have also an international support. And it is also here when I see, when it comes to women in the negotiations, we had such a fantastic support from women within Afghanistan and also internationally. But the voice of Muslim women was so low and very insignificant. I think it is very important that people in Afghanistan, especially in the future of Afghanistan, should see that it is not something very strange that we women in Afghanistan, as women, Muslim women, Afghan women want. It is taken for granted in most Muslim countries. It's a normal thing. And so this will help a lot.
Thank you for that. Very important point that you just made. We have, by the way, a question that has come in. I'm going to intersperse some of these as we go along that came in. And in a way, it's directed for the Lieutenant Colonel. But actually, Fatima Galani, I also think you might want to comment on it potentially. The question has come in about the following. It says, how would you compare the progress and challenges of the Afghan Ministry of Defense compared to the Ministry of Interior? Lieutenant Colonel, do you have a view on that? Would you like to comment? And then Fatima, I hope you will as well. Please.
Sure. In regards to comparing the Army and the Ministry of Interior, which is the police, it is a fair comparison on the integration of women. And so that's the recruitment of women into the defense sector and the interior, as well as the training that these women need to go to. It's really important that we leverage the Ministry of Interior because they're the ones that are at the front line down at the familial level and are the ones who have access to the family response units that the coalition has supported these many years, that allows for the identification and the support network that hopefully prevents domestic violence from occurring and from raising to the level of animosity between families. And the defense sector, it requires a little bit different training because of the nature of what soldiers are to be doing, and particularly in Afghanistan with the internal defense of their country. And so the programs that we provided for the Afghan National Defense Security Forces was combined because women, regardless if they're in the army or in the police, they both need empowerment training, they both need leadership training. And as Ms. Galiani stated, yes, we did have an opportunity to train and mentor males as well, because again, we want males champions of change to be the lead. And so there has been a lot of change, even within the two ministries since my last deployment in 2017 to when I deployed in 2019. And it does demonstrate the persistence and the resilience of Afghans wanting to change the factors on the ground in accordance with their opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. And by the way, as I go and ask you, Fatima, for your response, I should have mentioned the question came in from Oana Negu. Forgive me if I hope I pronounced it correctly. Oana Negu. Fatima, would you have a view?
Yes. Well, if you compare women in the army to compare with the police, the work of the police was a little bit more familiar because it was in the cities. It was with people and with the people who were familiar with these kind of things, to see women in every kind of uniform or working. But women in the police, in the army, they had a really challenge because they would go to the areas that they were not used to seeing women working, seeing women equal to men. So they had a little bit more difficulties. Because of being in the Red Crescent, sometimes we had to work as auxiliary to work with them parallel to each other. I could hear from them that in the remote areas, they had problem even with women. So it took a long time so they should be accepted. But I would like to compare women to women within these two ministries. Education would make a huge difference. If this officer or a policewoman was highly educated, you could see from the experience and the assurance that she had, she would go and talk with authority, work with authority. So I would insist upon, yes, more education, because that will make them different and go to look equal and act equal to their male colleagues.
I personally, I have to say, I very much appreciate your words, Fatima, if I may say that, because I know when we held the U.S. Afghan Women's Council meetings, I know you have always been a very strong advocate for not only the advancement of women, but also the very basics. I mean, in terms of women being educated. It helps women, whatever discipline. It helps an individual, a human being in whatever discipline. Absolutely. It's a very, very important point. I'm going to ask, let me go. I'm going to go to, if I may, I just see this, a dear friend of ours, Ambassador Shirin Tahir Kelly. She has a question for Fatima. So I'm also going to say hi to Shirin Tahir Kelly. She says, it's so good to see you again. We all admire the ongoing work you do to make Afghanistan peaceful and successful. In these years since you and I met, how much has changed and what would be your priorities for women going forward? Thank you so much, Shirin, for that question. And we're delighted that you are with us. Fatima, please.
Shirin, it is wonderful to have you. You will not believe that how often I think of you. I've lost you. And I would like very much to get in touch. Shirin, I tried, like every woman, that things that we have achieved in Afghanistan for the last 20 years should be kept. You will be so proud of your sisters in Afghanistan. If you remember those young girls that used to come to study in the US. One is our ambassador in New York now. They are deputy ministers, they are ministers. They have achieved such wonderful places in Afghanistan and meaningful, because these were the girls that they grew up in the war in Afghanistan. And some also got help from neighboring countries that when they were in exile, they had some education. But what they came back, this is a very important thing, and achieved a lot. If I tell you the difference between when I was growing up in Afghanistan, you knew even then, we didn't have to worry about things. We were taking everything for granted, that this is it. Women are equal. The same day we got permission to vote, men and women together. And we had women in the open competition to gain seats in the parliament. So but they were very few. Today, there are hundreds of thousands of those women, hundreds of thousands of those young, fantastic, dedicated women, that it is not fair not to support them and assure that we will have an Afghanistan that they could thrive in it and not be scared anymore.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fatima. And thank you so much, Ambassador Sharin Tahir Kelly, our friend Sharin. I want to go to Lieutenant Colonel Trogus. A different question for you, and then I'm going to go back to a question that's come in from our viewership. You really gave us a very robust view of what were the types of actions you were taking while you were in Afghanistan and at the ministry. You know, one of the things that you certainly know about the United States is, you know, assessing and measuring progress has always been part of a congressional action. And our US Congress wants to know how monies are being used and how they're measured. So what were the hurdles that you had to measuring progress? And, you know, how did you surmount that? I mean, in terms of the implementation of this program, because it's really rather striking what you described.
Well, first off, some of the hurdles, as mentioned before, was the leadership buy-in and working with my fellow advisors. And so to overcome that, I had a staff of 2 additional general advisors. One was from Sweden and one was from New Zealand, and they're phenomenal advisors. And so I committed one of my teammates to one of the databases, the Afghan personal pay system, that allowed us to draw information and data so that we could get a good site picture of where Afghan women were located throughout the provinces. The majority of them were in Kabul because with regards to the distribution of women in the army, we weren't quite out to the provinces yet. And so that gave us an understanding of some of the policy actions that we needed to do. And then it was just being very persistent, being confident in what we were supporting the Afghans. Again, identifying an Afghan problem and an Afghan solution. And so providing those recommendations to my Afghan counterpart, who had a team of young Afghans who over the year that I was there advising them, definitely saw their own growth and their own professional development, and just understanding what, you know, my counterparts have been through over the last decade. And so these obstacles allowed us to measure progress. So one of the significant challenges was getting the projects for funding to be accepted. And so I was able to write projects, and that came with its own trials and tribulations because that required full-time work. But once I was able to get these projects written, then getting them through the Afghan system was an extreme challenge. And so that's something for the international community is to think about, is we have to have gender sensitive financial processes through the programming, planning, budgeting, and execution process that allows these women-specific projects to get approved in a timely manner and does not get defunded or unauthorized because of internal bureaucracies. And so fortunately, the international community through the NATO Afghan National Army Trust Fund was very generous. And so any projects we were able to put forth, they were approving. And so our international counterparts are responsible for quite a few of the capacity building programs, such as the master's degrees and bachelor's degrees, where the US funding provides a lot of support in the facilities as well as the language training. And so, but just understanding some of these dynamics down at the gender advisor level and all the nuances that goes into measuring progress. And so seeing a Afghan women in a military uniform or a police uniform is fantastic, but we also need to make sure that she is empowered with her voice, that she has the ability to speak and communicate, and that her counterparts, mainly her Afghan male peers, are receptive to that, and that they are able to be united in order to secure and stabilize Afghanistan.
I think very well said, very well said. And thank you for that articulation, because the program is a very interesting one. It's an impactful one. And thank you for also putting that challenge in context. We have another question that I want to put forward. And this one I'll address to both of you, but Fatima, I think it will go to you first. Specifically, let me read it. It says, compared to the 1990s, the Taliban has implemented relatively liberal is in quotes, policies regarding women and education. That being said, they still have a long way to go. If the government of Afghanistan is going to reach a power sharing agreement with the Taliban, how can we be sure that women will continue to gain access to various facets of Afghan society? It's from, there is no name attached to it. But Fatima, let's go to you here. What your response is to that question?
Paula, it's very important that we know that if one day that we have a united Afghanistan and a mutual Afghanistan with Taliban, it will not be just them; it will be all of us. And then laws and regulations will be made by us all. Yes, now they speak very openly that women will be able to be educated and work and all that. But we will not take it for granted. We will want to make it clear that what exactly do they want and what they say. But as I said earlier, it will not be just the Taliban, it will be all of us together. So we are hoping that we will find a way that we secure what is happening for women in the constitution, because it is an Islamic constitution. This is not a secular constitution. And based on that and explaining, negotiating and conversation is a very important thing. For women, when we were facing the Taliban the first days, they were not very comfortable with us. And I'm sure that they had question marks that, are we there just as a token or are we for real? Now they deal with us very nicely. They deal with us like any other colleague. They answer our questions. They pose questions to us. We talk to each other when we are out of the negotiation room. So things will change with conversation. Look, Paula, when we were making this constitution, don't think that it was easy. We had people who had exactly the same way of thinking. But what we did, we explained. What we did, we took help from people like Dr. Hashim Kamali, who is the authority in these things. We took help and advice from our own ulamas inside Afghanistan, but also from very renowned ulamas outside Afghanistan. And some of them are shared. So it is very important that we have a strong voice, not just women's voice, but men's voice, and also to have the voice of those who speak with authority. So this is important.
Thank you for that. I got a notice that Minister Safi has really been very persistent, and we were gratified for that. We appreciate her trying and her efforts to get on. Let me ask if she is on with us. I believe that we have her audio. Minister Safi, are you on with us now?
I am on, and this persistency is a part of my advocacy. So I am here.
Okay, well, we're very appreciative, Minister. Let me ask you, what role has your ministry played, relative to ensuring that the voice of Afghan women and their priorities are not only heard, but implemented? We'd like to hear from you, and gratified that you could come on and join us. Please, over to you.
Thank you very much. I will skip the recognition, but I would really heartfully thank you, Afghan Women Council, American Council on Peace and Security, in partnership with Afghan Atlantic Council for this opportunity, not only now, but throughout the last 2 decades. As someone who has been brought up in war and lived a refugee life, I really appreciate the backup which our international sisters in United States, Europe, all around the world, they have given us. So I thank you very much. What we have done in the ministry, it is going to be almost 1 year that I have been in the Ministry of Women Affairs. Prior to that, I was in Ministry of Information and Culture. Why I joined the government from civil society? The reason was that I really saw the space and the platform for those actions which we advocated. So it was an opportunity for me to implement the advocacy which we have been doing for participation, prevention, and promotion of women. As a result of that, coming to Ministry of Women Affairs, the first thing which we very much are recognizing, and we thank the President in the Cabinet, we build up on what we had done. I heard a little bit my friend when she talked about Security Council Resolution 1325. Last year was the year where Afghanistan government specifically allocated budget from national budget for the implementation of 1325. We have been advocating for the localization of 1325 in the last couple of years, nationally and internationally. And very happily, through the coordination of the women and also Ministry of Women Affairs, we presented the Deputy Governor's position to the President and to the Cabinet, and that was approved. The reason that I'm indicating this is that this is for the first time in local governance that a woman has a place, which really matters and has a strong effect in the situation analysis and also effectiveness of the programs, which is planned and designed for the life improvement of women on the whole in capital and also in provinces. The other thing which we did, we built up on the coordination mechanism through the deputy governors and the women directorates in the provinces, along with all the social activists, education activists, the female, in order to have a very clear analysis, and based on that, we suggest to the local governance and then to the capital to be more effectiveness. What I want to say is two things. The first thing is the reason that I joined government from civil society was to really, it is the time to go to effectiveness and efficiency, as we call women responsible citizens. So it was an opportunity for us to show up and to indicate how we can contribute in nation building, peace building. The other thing which we did, we started a consultation mechanism, even maybe one question or maybe 10 questions. But in 24 to 48 hours, we could sit, analyze, and discuss what we want. The result of that is I'm thankful to Sarah that I sent an analysis of the strategy which the United States peace strategy, which they had sent to Afghanistan. The analysis was not by the employees of Women Ministry, but it was coordinated for the women in the provinces in order to ask them what do they think and how can the international partners, specifically women partners, help the women of Afghanistan. I'm sure that analysis must be shared with you, but in short, I would like to post the last part, which the women has suggested. If you ask them for 5 things which they would say Constitution of Afghanistan, Constitution of Afghanistan, Constitution of Afghanistan. Why would they say that? Because they see themselves as a respected family member, from house to a social worker, to a teacher, engineer, doctor, director, deputy director, etc., etc., etc. The second thing was, even if there is any proposal, it shall be commanded based on the approaches which are indicated in the Constitution. The other thing is that we want a mutual accountability and mutual responsibility. We are struggling. This is our nation, the women of Afghanistan, along with the men of Afghanistan. But we want all our humanitarian population around the world, all the people who have supported until the future, to stand with us for Islamic Republic, because that is the only shelter, we can say, or the only roof or ceiling where everyone can see themselves. The other thing is that there should be a very, very clear monitoring mechanism in order to really see how we are moving. This process is a very, very lengthy process, very cautious. The more we are cautious at the beginning, the more impact and effective results we have at the end. The last thing, we would like guarantees, and we would like U.S. Afghan Women Council, American Council for Women, Peace and Security, and the Atlantic Council to stand with us and urge for regional and international guarantees. Because the last 20 years, you have invested a lot. Do you want to clean up your investment, to just erase it? Or as human beings, do you want to stand with us? So we want regional and international guarantees. It is very easy. Everything is done through dialogue. We sit, we talk, we discuss. We want to live the way we want to live. Afghanistan is not the only Islamic country in the world. We can see the other Islamic countries. So why are we putting all the definitions which they have defined for their Islam on Afghanistan? I would stop here. If there are any questions, I'm ready to answer.
Thank you very, very much, Minister. We're very, very appreciative of the fact that you're able to come on. The sad part is that our program ends in 4 minutes. So, and we have a closing where Sarah Greengrass, the Executive Director of the U.S. Afghan Women's Council, will close us. So forgive me, Minister. I am very glad, though, that you, A, were able to come on, and secondly, that you also well articulated exactly how you see the situation now. So my apologies for not having a question, because our viewership were closed in 3 minutes. And also we have the other 2 panelists, but we're grateful that you were able to make it. So let me now transition to Sarah Greengrass, and I really want to commend her. She is the Executive Director of the U.S. Afghan Women's Council. She is a major mover and shaker in my book. She has brought all the different sponsors together and this series, and was adamant about not talking about only what hasn't happened, but the achievements that Afghan women have made. And for that, she deserves a great deal of credit. Sarah, over to you to close us. And I do want to, if I could say, thank you, Fatima, and thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Trogus, and thank you, Minister Safi. We've been honored by your presence today. Sarah, over to you.
On behalf of the Atlantic Council, the American Council for Women, Peace, and Security, and all of us at the U.S. Afghan Women's Council, I'd like to thank our panelists not only for their participation today, but for their unyielding dedication to Afghan women and Afghanistan's future. The U.S. Afghan Women's Council is a nonpartisan public-private partnership that convenes government, civil society, and private sector around the goal of supporting Afghan women and girls' education, healthcare, economic empowerment, and leadership. As we have done for nearly 20 years, our members and partners in both the private and public sector leverage resources through member-driven initiatives to raise awareness and amplify the voices, experiences, and needs of Afghan women and girls. This event and series on women's gains in Afghanistan is part of that effort. For those of you who have joined all three events in this series, thank you. Thank you to the Afghan women who have shared their powerful stories and ideas, particularly Fatima Galani, Lieutenant and Minister Safi today, as well as the dedicated women leaders of the US military, like Lieutenant Colonel Natalie Trogus, who have shared their perspectives on the gains they have achieved while serving, and to our civil society leaders who have dedicated themselves to improving conditions for women and girls in Afghanistan and who have shared their work with us. As the Commission on the Status of Women and Women's Month comes to a close, the women we heard from today and throughout this series are a critical reminder that women's leadership is not time-bound, nor is our duty to support and strengthen it. For Afghanistan to rebuild and peace to be sustainable, as we heard from all of our panelists, the country will require a diversity of ideas, experiences, leadership, and action from all its people to move forward. Such progress is impossible without the dedicated long-term involvement of women, which allows for shifts in both long-held beliefs and practices, including those of the Taliban, as Ms. Galani so importantly noted. Women's leadership and that of civil society allows for systematic approaches to peace and to alliance building, which in the words of U.S. Afghan Women's Council Vice Chair Phyllis McGraw, depends on those who can help broker differences, lead the group to common ground, and think differently today than they did yesterday. This ultimately will allow peace to not only be enduring, but to create a shared vision of Afghanistan's future that puts Afghan women and all of Afghanistan's people at the center. Thank you again for joining us. As we have done in the past, all of us look forward to continuing to support the powerful ideas, programs, and people dedicated to advancing positive change for Afghan women and girls. We hope you will join us in continuing our work to bolster and support women's leadership. Thank you.